Jean-Claude Van Damme has finally broken his silence on Steven Seagal, and what he revealed isn't just shocking, it's worse than anyone imagined. For years, fans speculated about their rivalry, begged for answers, and even dreamed of an on-screen reunion, but instead of reconciliation, they got something far more explosive. It began with a cryptic Instagram post that hinted at peace, but as it turned out, it was only the calm before the storm. Now, after decades of tension, Van Damme has stepped forward with brutal honesty, shattering the long-standing myth behind one of Hollywood's most notorious martial arts feuds. Back in the early 1990s, if you walked into a video rental store, two names stood out like giants: Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal. They were action icons, martial arts masters, and symbols of raw power, one famous for his spinning kicks and competition background, the other for his cold stare and sharp Aikido wrist locks. On screen, they were unstoppable forces. Behind the scenes, however, a silent war was brewing, one far more personal and far less choreographed. At first, there was no public drama, no tabloids screaming for attention. But if you paid close attention to interviews and whispers around Hollywood, a pattern emerged. Seagal had a habit of belittling other martial artists, especially Van Damme. He once referred to Van Damme not as a fighter, but as a dancer, a subtle jab at his ballet training, meant to discredit his legitimacy. He never said Van Damme's name, but everyone knew who he meant. Van Damme, for his part, stayed quiet, focusing on films like Bloodsport, Kickboxer, and Universal Soldier. He had nothing to prove. His tournament wins and relentless training spoke for themselves. Still, insiders could sense the tension. Crews and producers knew better than to book them at the same events. Hollywood had a cold war of its own built, not on punches, but on pride. Fans endlessly debated who would win in a real fight, Seagal with his Aikido or Van Damme with his speed and power. But the two men never faced, off until one legendary night nearly changed everything. At a party hosted by Sylvester Stallone in the late 90s, where Hollywood's biggest names mingled, Seagal once again mocked Van Damme. This time Van Damme heard it, and he didn't stay silent. He confronted Seagal directly, challenged him to step outside and prove himself like real martial artists. Seagal refused. Later that night, Van Damme tracked him down at a nightclub and challenged him again. Once more, Seagal backed down. Stallone later confirmed the incident, calling it one of the most intense confrontations he'd ever seen, and saying outright Van Damme was too strong and Seagal wanted no part of him. Years passed, and the feud remained an open secret until 2023, when Van Damme casually revealed in an interview that he had once been offered $20 million to fight Seagal in a real, unscripted bout at the Mirage Casino in Las Vegas. The deal was real. The money was on the table. Van Damme said yes. Seagal never showed. It wasn't a rumor, it was a fact. Backed by heavyweight producer Peter Guber, the revelation stunned fans. Why didn't Seagal take the fight? Was it fear, ego, or a calculated decision to protect his carefully crafted mystique? Van Damme didn't brag about it. He said it simply, like a man finally done keeping secrets. The numbers spoke for themselves. The silence from Seagal's side spoke even louder. Then came the twist no one saw coming. In a quiet, carefully staged Instagram post, Van Damme appeared smiling at a dinner table with none other than Steven Seagal. The caption: "Thank you, Steven, and your family for the fantastic dinner. Wishing you a happy birthday. Big announcement coming soon." The image sent shockwaves through the internet. Were they finally at peace? Was a long-rumored film in the works, or was this just a stunt? The video was short, silent, and strangely restrained. Seagal looked stone-faced. Van Damme smiled, but not like a man reconciled. Something about his eyes, his expression, the timing of the post, it all felt calculated. This wasn't just a reunion. It was a setup, a teaser, a warning. What comes next, no one knows for sure. But if Van Damme's post is any indication, the real story between these two action legends isn't over. The Cold War may be turning hot again, and the big announcement he teased, that could be the moment everything finally explodes. Jean-Claude Van Damme finally broke his silence, and when he did, it wasn't with fireworks or fury, but with a calm, devastating clarity that cut deeper than any fight ever could. No viral video, no staged confrontation, just one quiet interview, where he dropped a single sentence that shattered decades of speculation. He is a fraud. There was no hesitation in his voice, no bitterness, just a weary kind of honesty, like a man who had carried a burden for far too long. For Van Damme, this wasn't about revenge or ego anymore. It was about setting the record straight. After years of watching Steven Seagal build his reputation on what Van Damme now calls smoke and mirrors, he'd had enough. He talks about training CIA guys, fighting off bad guys in real life, Van Damme said, but he's never fought in a real tournament, not once, never stepped into a ring like I did. The blow landed hard, not just because of the content, but because of who was saying it. Van Damme wasn't some anonymous critic or online troll. He was a legitimate competitor, a man who had bled for his wins and earned his scars. His words had weight, and he knew it. He didn't stop there. He once again brought up the infamous $20 million fight offer, a real Las Vegas bout, Two legends, one ring. They offered us both the same deal, he said. I said yes. He didn't. Van Damme made the implication crystal clear. Seagal had a chance to settle everything, publicly and definitively, and he walked away. Then Van Damme addressed the Instagram post that had gone viral just weeks earlier at the dinner that showed him and Seagal smiling at the same table, raising glasses like old friends. But the truth behind that moment was far colder. That dinner wasn't friendship, he revealed. It was observation. I wanted to see if anything had changed, and it hadn't. He had hoped, after all these years, that Seagal might have grown, matured, shed the persona. But instead he found the same bravado, the same tall tales, the same hollow posturing, the big announcement that had been teased. This was it. Not a collaboration, not a film, just the truth. And the truth hit harder than anyone expected, because while fans had spent decades debating who would win in a fight, who had better kicks, who made the more iconic films, Van Damme revealed that it was never really about combat, it was about respect. And Seagal, he claimed, never earned his. Van Damme didn't shout, he didn't gloat. He didn't market his words like a media stunt. He spoke plainly, and in doing so, delivered a reckoning. Once those words were out, he is a fraud, there was no going back. The silent rivalry had become a public reckoning, and Seagal, he said nothing, no interview, no post, not even a denial. His silence, once mysterious, now felt hollow. For many it confirmed what Van Damme had exposed, not just a man dodging a fight, but one who had spent years avoiding the truth. The fallout went deeper than reputation. For fans who had idolized both men, it was a moment of reassessment. It wasn't about picking sides anymore, it was about understanding the difference between performance and practice. What does it mean to be a martial artist? Is it about the image, or the effort, the illusion, or the integrity? Van Damme, who had once stayed quiet for the sake of Hollywood politics, had finally spoken, and in doing so, he didn't just settle an old score, he rewrote the entire narrative. No follow-up interviews, no press tour, just one hard truth that pulled back the curtain on a decades-long myth. Still, not everyone turned on Seagal. Some fans remained fiercely loyal, arguing that his early films helped introduce Aikido to mainstream cinema and that his influence on martial arts culture can't be dismissed, and that's true to a point. But legacy isn't built on mystique alone, it's built on proof, and that's where Van Damme's story lands. In the stark contrast between two men who rose through the same ranks but walked very different paths, one built his legacy on earned discipline, documented skill, and vulnerability. The other, Van Damme now claims, built his on mystery, posturing, and illusion. And in the end, when the silence finally broke, it wasn't fists or kicks that defined the moment, it was honesty. So now, after decades of questions, challenges, and near showdowns, the final blow has been delivered, not in a ring, not on its screen, but in words. The feud, now stripped of legend and filtered through truth, may not have ended the way fans imagined, but maybe it ended the way it needed to. Because now the question isn't just who would have won, it's this: was Steven Seagal ever the real deal or just the greatest performance of his career?